Kristin, welcome to the Childhood Potential Online Montessori Conference, and thank you for accepting to be one of our speakers again this year.
Thank you so much for having me. What is it? Has it been 3 or 4 years? I've been on this amazing conference. I keep telling everyone this is basically it's true. It's the only conference that I continuously always sign up for and I always listen to. I listen to a lot of stuff, but this has been like a good friend that has followed me through the years. I'm so happy to be having this
Oh,
conversation with
thank
you.
you. Thank you. That's so kind. I will say a few words about you and then we will dive into the topic. You are a respectful parenting educator, you are a speaker, you are an author of best-selling children's books about emotions called Sometimes I Cry, Sometimes I Laugh. You are also the founder of Respectful Mom, a global platform where you educate parents and caregivers on the practices of respectful parenting through different workshops, online courses. And your most popular workshop is called Welcoming the Waves of Emotions. And it has been translated into 5 languages up to date. You have given more than 250 key talks and parent workshops around the world, and you have been featured in such publications as Psychology Today, Institute of Child Psychology, and Motherly. What did I forget?
Thank you so much. A long introduction. I'm humbled. It's been more than 10 years of this work as a parenting educator. But recently, and I'm actually in my Montessori classroom right now, I just got my diploma as a AMI Montessori teacher. So now I am stepping my first steps into teaching alongside my parent education, and it's been an incredibly rewarding, inspiring experience so far. So yeah, I think that's a fun thing to add since it's a new adventure for me.
Yay. And you are based now in Tokyo, but you don't come
Based,
from Tokyo, you come from Iceland.
I'm from Iceland, based in Tokyo, and my most recent workshop is on the topic that we will be discussing today, and it's the highly sensitive, strong-willed children. And it is a talk that I launched in Iceland last summer, and I am doing a few online workshops and webinars on it this season and into the new year. And it's really has shifted my focus for this chapter in my parenting education. And find myself talking a lot about this kind of a subcategory of children that are highly sensitive, strong-willed, spirited. I mean, there's an umbrella that kind of captures with few names that people have maybe seen around deeply feeling kids, and experts in the field are speaking about these children. And it's really important for parents to get, first of all, insight and acknowledgement and validation, but also some real tools of how to kind of live in a more harmonious relationship with these children.
Mhm. When you talk about highly sensitive and strong-willed children, what does that actually mean? Let's begin with something foundational. What do these children behave like or look like in day-to-day life?
It's very interesting to kind of start collecting these kind of tendencies. Character traits are maybe a little bit strong. Tendencies for these children, behavioral and temperamental as well. Um, it's not really accurate to say that all of these children would be later diagnosed with ADHD or something that could be kind of um, an official diagnosis, because that is not the case. Even though neurodiverse children usually are highly sensitive, that usually correlates together. You can still have highly sensitive, strong-willed child who does not have ADHD or is not on any kind of spectrum. So it's important for people to kind of, distinguish there.
Mhm.
But I do share in my workshops, I do share kind of a collection of list, and it's quite an impactful slide. And I was hoping maybe we can pull it for
Yes,
for the listeners. Okay.
perfect.
So I wanted to pull this up because is a few points that we can't maybe not go over all of them in any detail, but I want people to look this over with us. And I call this slide, if you know, you know. What characterizes these kids? Because it really is an aha moment for so many parents to kind of just go over this list and see if it resonates with you. So these kids, they go often from 0 to 100 over seemingly small or unexpected things. They are labeled difficult, traumatic, intense, stubborn, and maybe a million other, oftentimes sadly negative adjectives that are used to describe these kids by teachers, caregivers, parents as well. Their emotions are explosive and big, and confusingly validating their emotions often makes them angrier and explode even more. It feels like as much as you want to support them, it can be very difficult to hold space for them in a way that you feel would be helpful. Then they often reject comfort. It's the same as we're talking about. They reject comfort and support during these outbursts. They might yell, "Go away, leave me alone, stop talking," or they might remove themselves, hide, go under a blanket when upset. Their anger often escalates to aggression, making it not uncommon for these kids to hit, kick, scratch, or bite. This is obviously quite a tricky behavior to navigate often. And then these kids are also quick to blame others when things go wrong. That is also very, very tricky to navigate often for parents. They have a hard time talking about emotions and reflecting on difficult event or past situation can be difficult for these kids. But also you will see that these kids are notably smart. They are intelligent. They pick up skills easily. They are talented. And they have a very strong sense of justice. And they will often be the first ones to make sure that rules are followed, especially for other people or other children, even more than themselves. They will be like quite sensitive to what others are often doing in the environment. They are empaths. They have a huge heart. These kids are kind, compassionate, and that is a side that comes through more clearly when they are regulated. But at the same time, they have a hard time apologizing, and they have a hard time taking accountability for their behavior, kind of admitting that they might have done something that was, not the right thing in that situation. They have strong opinions and are not afraid to voice them. They are typically not people pleasers, and they will stand their ground, these kids, even when threatened with consequences or punishment. And I will never forget, there was a moment, this is a few years ago, when I was solo parenting with 3 kids, and my youngest was in the carrier. I think he was only maybe 7 months or something. And it was nighttime, we're getting ready to go to bed, and it was getting late. I was getting tired, frustrated, kind of building up, just one of those evenings. And I can't remember, something happened. And I completely lost my patience with my kids, like really in a bad way. I was just like yelling at them out of nowhere, kind of threatening them and telling them, that's it now, I've had it, and da, 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 da. And I remember kind of, no story, I'm just gonna, you have to go straight to bed right now. And my oldest daughter, she's like, ching, runs in like millisecond, and she's in bed like with her covered blanket over her, like ready, listening to mommy. And then my second child, my son, who is 100% highly sensitive, strong-willed, I think he's about 5 years old at the time. I will never forget, he is like clenching his fists, and he's standing in his red boxer underwear, like nothing else. It's just like, and he's standing in front of the bed, in front of me, like between me and my daughter. And he's saying, "No, mommy, this is not okay. You are being unfair. This is
Oh,
not how you should talk to us. Stop it now. And he's like standing his ground, super powerful posture, 5 years old, and telling me that I have literally just crossed the line and this is not how I should conduct myself. He's standing up for himself, he's standing up for his siblings. And it was such a powerful moment. And it's such a strong snapshot into the characters of these kids and the heart and the justice and the courage that these kids possess. So it is a true strength. And this obviously, these are change makers. These are the leaders of our future. This is what the world, these kids are what the world needs more of, these type of people. So we cannot underestimate the power that these kids hold and the incredible kind of nature that we want to obviously help steer in the right direction, because these are powerful forces at play, and there are two sides of the coin for sure. So it can be difficult to parent these kids, but oh my God, their potential and their compassion and sense of justice is unmatched. It's really incredible to witness.
oh, you made me so emotional with the story. I imagined it like vividly. So thank you for sharing.
I mean, it is, like I said, it's a challenge, but it is so rewarding as well to be and inspiring to be around these kids. Um, so this is one of the things that I wanted to share. Their strong emotions and their strong opinions are something to harness. And if we just finish the list, we talk about here, yeah, the next one is how these kids notice the smallest details and they don't like change or novel experiences. They're quite sensitive to stimulation like noise, to lighting, big crowds, food texture, labels in clothes. They're often, picky eaters, but sometimes it's not about the taste, but it's actually about the texture or the temperature of the food. Um, and they have a hard time taking directions and often interpret simple instructions as criticism or as scolding them, which is a very tricky thing to navigate as a parent, because often we need to give them instructions and we need to set the boundaries, but they are quite sensitive to tone, and even if we are slightly elevated in our a little bit irritated or frustrated, they will sense that, they will pick up our facial expressions. And these are the kids who will say, "Stop yelling at me," when we hardly raised our voice, and it can feel confusing to us and difficult to kind of manage. um, and last point is that they're often quite black and white in thinking. It's the all or nothing. The whole day is terrible, or this whole activity is so boring and I hate it and let's go home. Or, like everybody is against me, or I never get to do anything. And I tell parents about that, please try to not take the bait when these kids, this is how they're communicating. We have to kind of step back and see the bigger picture and understand that they are so sensitive that their feelings often, they just take over their sense of being. So the negative or the uncomfortable feeling or the boring, their boredom, it literally takes over, and it feels like it's all consuming. And that is why the all or nothing, and that is why they feel it's so black and white and see the world through this lens. So if we just take a moment and try not to take it too personally and see through it, like, this is, in this moment, my child feels that this is everything, this is all that is happening, but it really isn't like that, because usually after the activity or the next day or even just 30 minutes later, they're like, this is great, this is the best day ever. So it can feel like a little bit of a roller coaster ride. So we have to kind of see through that a little bit. It's going to help us. So I hope that people watching are relating to this list, especially if they have a child that they are trying to kind of figure out how to approach in many ways, and they can sense that there is something different with them. Things that work so well with maybe your other child might not work so well for this child. And I know that it is difficult because often the intentional parents who are really sensitive and they really want to support their kids in emotional intelligence and navigating their emotional side in the best way possible. These are the parents who are left feeling very confused. You know, I'm only trying to help. I'm only trying to validate their emotions. But what I'm getting back is more anger and more resistance, and they run away from me and they say, stop it, I don't want to talk. We can see them pushing down emotions, and it can feel alarming for us as parents. So first of all, it's important for parents out there to know that they are not alone. It is confusing and it is messy to parent these kids, but it can be incredibly rewarding as well, especially if we start to understand where they are coming from in a little bit of a deeper way.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think we should move on to the next, and then I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can just kind of discuss more. I love this quote from Dr. Thomas Boyce. He is the author of one of my favorite books, The Orchid and the Dandelion: Why Some Children Struggle and How All Can Thrive. And I think it's in the very beginning of the book. This is how he starts. He says, what if the children about whom we worry most were actually those with the greatest promise?
Mm.
And it's so important, again, to kind of reframe. And it really does start with us, the mindset shift of like, how do we see these children? I know it often feels that they are the source of all of our problems. And, you know, and some days and some seasons, it kind of is true because there is just a lot of friction and it's difficult to connect with them. So yeah, it may feel like that, but the mindset shift of trying to really see the beautiful, positive, powerful side to these kids is going to kind of be our guiding light and will help ground us in, you know, to help us kind of come from the place where we can actually start to support them. We're not here to fix these kids, but we really need to try to find ways to meet them in a way that actually supports them. And this is what's so important and interesting about Dr. Boyce's research, which spans over 3 decades now. He and his colleagues, I think for the most part, he was at University of Virginia, but now recently I think he's in University of California. But his research spans around highly sensitive children. So he and his colleagues were conducting series of tests where they would put children kind of in situations where there was some kind of a stressor for the nervous system. And then they would identify the children who responded in a highly sensitive way, like kind of like a bigger reaction. And these tests were minimal, and then sometimes a little bit more challenging, but even just like taste of sour lemon, how does that affect the nervous system of a young child, and series of things. So then they had a pool of these highly sensitive children, and then they followed these children into adulthood. And what they found was predictable, but also very surprising. So a portion of the sensitive children grew up developing series of stress-related illness, both mental illness, also physically, actually were physically sicker than, you know, children that were not pointing in the direction of being so sensitive. But what was so surprising was that the other part of these children who originally were testing as highly sensitive, they grew up showing the lowest rate of mental illness and physical illness. So you're kind of like having 2 groups end up in the 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. And this is what they found extremely interesting. And they obviously started to think, what is the reason? How can the child that is testing in the same sensitivity, have two different outcomes, and they found out there is one kind of reason, or there's a one predictor that will differentiate these two groups, and that's environment.
Mhm.
What is the type of environment that the child is growing up in? And the low stress environment, the nurturing household, the supportive environment is what kind of brings these children up to the top 10%, where they are experiencing like highly functioning in life, and they are well adjusted, they are very resilient, and not just mentally, but so interestingly, even physically, they get less sick and less disease. So it really gets you into this mindset and into this place as a parent of almost like, oh my God, there's so much responsibility now that lies on my shoulders. I am now creating an environment for this child. And that can be scary, right? But it's also incredibly empowering because we have something to say here. And it is so important. And this is something, a disclosure I say in all of my talks. These kids do not need a perfect environment. Actually, it's going to be messy. It's going to feel like you are failing so much of the time, but it's the overall general atmosphere. It's like the overall general attitude that you have towards your child that matters. That's what's going to be internalized in the long run. And yes, we're going to go through really difficult seasons where we are just endlessly bumping into walls with our kids. And this child maybe in particular. So I think the big message with my talks is usually try to understand these kids and realize that you hold a lot of power, but you do not have to be perfect. These kids mostly need to feel that they are loved and that we want to be there for them, that we want to support them, and that we want to grow with them. Even if we make a million mistakes along the way, that we are circling back and we are apologizing to them, and then we are reflecting on our own behavior, and we're just trying our very best. So I think that must be enough. And it's important that we keep that in mind as we navigate our relationship with these kids.
Mhm. You often say that these kids are actually being deeply misunderstood. Can you help us understand what's beneath the surface when they are overwhelmed and acting out? Like what's there that we don't understand?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are probably one of the most misunderstood group of kids. And I have to say that these children, they hold such a special place in my heart. I notice them, I notice them in the playground. I notice them in the classroom. I notice them in the siblings group of my friends or family. I have a child like this, and I'm deep in the middle of trying to figure out the best way to support him. He's doing great, but it's been a challenge. And this is one of the reasons why I really went into researching this topic so much. And I started to pull from these experts. This is what I've found, and this is what's working for me. And now I want to share it with other parents, right? It's been kind of a 5 to 6 year journey, resulting in this that we're talking about now. But also, I was a highly sensitive and am a highly sensitive person, but I definitely was this type of child, highly sensitive, strong-willed child. And I'm still navigating life with many of these tendencies even. I'm just an adult now, so I have a little bit of a better emotional regulation, but I can sense so much of this being true for me. So I think that understanding and feeling it has been my guiding light as well. And I know how misunderstood these children feel. And I think that is one of my personal kind of most open, like a difficult childhood wound to deal with, is that sense of being misunderstood. So for them, if you imagine, these kids are highly sensitive. So that means they have a lot of emotion. They have big emotion. Like imagine that their emotions are like a size or 2 or 3 bigger than their body. It's too big for them. And that means things get overwhelming really fast, right? And so these children, they may experience a sense of fear of their own feelings, of their own emotions, and kind of a fear of losing control. And they might even sense that often and feel they often have no control. And that is scary. So they themselves can be quite scared of these experiences when they are melting down, they're tantruming, and they are like kind of in this out of control behavior. We have to understand that they are often feeling scared on the inside themselves. And I love the quote, "A scary child is a scared child."
Mm-hmm.
It helps us with how we see our children in these difficult scenarios, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. A second thing I want to talk about when it comes to this misunderstanding is these kids often have a deep, innate fear of being too much, of being bad, of being unlovable. And I think this comes from kind of how they are wired, but I think it's also environmental because they just pick up on everything. And if we think about like, they're going to be getting a disproportionately larger amount of like disappointed looks or punishments or shaming talks or lectures or all of these things from their environment, because their behavior can be so challenging and it will impact them, and that will be sometimes how they start to fear and see themselves. And coupled with that is a deep fear of rejection. And especially, I mean, this is very known in ADHD world, that almost, I think 99%, that basically means 100% in scientific terms, of people with ADHD identify as having this rejection sensitivity trait, which is like a really severe sensitivity to rejection. And that also kind of just reinforces that inner fear, right? It is so painful to be rejected to these children. And so then they start to become highly vigilant and scan the environment constantly for signs, almost, just to see, am I being too much? Do they love me still? And they're almost like they're confirming whether they are bad or unworthy of love. And the last thing I want to talk about is, because of all of this, these traits together, sensitive children, they often start to armor themselves as a coping mechanism. Even when we are trying to be intentional and compassionate and empathetic as parents, we will still see this kind of armoring tendency for our children, sometimes more, sometimes less, kind of depending on the season. And this is their attempt to protect themselves from difficult emotions or these experiences or feeling too much, And if that happens too much, if the snowball kind of starts rolling a little bit too much, these kids can get stuck in defense. Dr. Gordon Neufeld talks about stuck kids. And he talks about children with hardened heart, like an armor around their heart a little bit. And it's something that just kind of accumulates over time, especially if conditions and environment is a little bit too harsh for them. So we are constantly trying to counter this tendency, because it's a natural tendency for them. They're going to do it. But we want to counter. That means we need to counter with compassion, with empathy, with a safe emotional space, with trying to kind of be graceful with them, seeing the best in them, and all these little different things that we want to do with them is notice their intention, and their intention is good. We notice that, and we kind of drawing out all of the goodness in them and holding space for that. Overarching all of this is that the last thing I want to say is that it seems to be almost how these kids are wired, but their emotions, especially the vulnerable emotions, they sit close to shame. I think it's because they just have an open heart. This just goes really deep into their core, all of what they're experiencing. So being sad even can feel too much, and it feels too vulnerable. And somehow there is shame very close to that. So they will push against those feelings and emotions. So this is like a few of the ways how these kids are so misunderstood, and it's kind of like the undercurrent of what often will drive their behavior that we see come through on the surface.
Mm-hmm. You told us that one of the first questions you ask parents is how often does their child cry, and what kind of tears are they crying? Why is this important?
Exactly. This is like getting to the core of the matter right there. Because if we think about what we just talked about, how they are defending against vulnerability and kind of, this hardened heart, the armor around their heart. This is also a cue to, talking about their crying. How often does the child cry? Is the child even crying at all? And if they cry, what kind of tears are coming? This is a kind of a signal and a cue to us. How stuck is the child? What we want to see is the specific types of tears, which are the soft tears. So this is something that Gordon Neufeld talks a lot about, and I love his work around aggressive children, stuck children, highly sensitive children. He talks a lot about these kids, and I've learned so much from his work. So the reason I want to focus on soft tears and the importance of these vulnerable emotions is that they are really key to our kids developing emotional intelligence and emotional regulation skills. I often say to parents that disappointment is key. Like if there's any emotion, if you talk about the spectrum of the difficult emotions, anger, frustration, and sadness, if there's any emotion that is almost the most precious one to hold space for, it is disappointment. So there is like a cycle, there's like a natural circuit, basically, that children move through when they are processing emotions, okay? And it's interesting and it's quite sad that these highly sensitive kids, they often miss out on completing what I call like a natural, positive, kind of constructive emotional processing circuit. They miss out on completing it because they have such a hard time entering into soft tears or allowing themselves to feel disappointment and the sad emotions. So let me just explain a little bit. What we want to see, and what we see quite naturally in most kids, more neurotypical kids, right, is that let's say that there's an event, there's a trigger, and they get frustrated. There's a trigger that triggers frustration. So we can say, okay, they are building a tower, and the tower keeps breaking. And it's frustrating, right? They try again and it breaks again, and they try again. And here frustration is acting, and it usually starts out acting as a motivational emotion because, I'm going to try again. I want to do it. I know I can do it. And sometimes it works. They tried 2, 3 times and now they figured it out and now it's fine. Now the tower holds. What happens to frustration? It leaves your system because there was a change. The tower isn't breaking anymore. So now there's a change and the frustration leaves with change. But what happens when there is no change. This we often see, obviously, when we are setting boundaries. So let's say, the child is asking to go to the grandma's house or grandpa's house. Maybe we talked about it before school and we were hoping to go in the afternoon. We pick up the child, we're in the car, and we have to break the news that unfortunately grandma is sick or cannot go. So we're gonna go home. No, the child is frustrated, and that can come with anger. And what does the frustration kind of motivate them to do? I want to change. I really want to change my mom's mind. Do I want to change the situation? I want to go, yes, 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 yes. And they're whining and they're even like getting angry. Now it's our job. This is what I teach in my Welcoming the Waves of Emotions workshop, of setting firm but loving limits. I hear you. Oh, that's very disappointing. You were really looking forward to going to see grandma and grandpa, but we're going home now. We cannot go to grandma's house, and we're very secure and safe in our boundary. This is when the magic happens, or should happen. This is when our child hears we are serious. There's nothing they can do, there is nothing they can say, and it's not going to change. And we are driving home, and we're not going to grandma's house, we're going the way to our house. And they can see and this is where their emotion starts to shift from frustration to disappointment, sadness, tears of futility. Tears and emotion, sadness, they understand that this is something that cannot be changed. And this is where we often hear them go from anger to and this is them processing. This is them actually learning and accepting the boundary. It's incredibly healing. And this is where the real emotional release comes. It's through soft tears, tears of futility. And this is what I'm describing is Dr. Gordon Neufeld's traffic circle model. It's what he talks about. You start with frustration, and then you move to the next outlet, which is change. If the event cannot be changed, there's like a closed door, you cannot exit, and the frustration moves into
Sadness.
tears of futility. Exactly. Sadness, disappointment. Key, gold. This is the treasure. And through those tears comes a real release of emotion, and they slowly start feeling better. And then there's acceptance. And that is the next kind of exit in the traffic circle. Acceptance and adjustment and adaptation. And this is where true emotion learning is happening, right? So the outcome of it's almost I kind of always see it as like a full circle moment. As soon as the child has like kind of accepted the no and they feel better and they get the good cry and you're there to support it and you're not cutting, okay, we can go to grandma, or let's just go to another friend's house, or I'm going to give you a lollipop. This is us cutting the natural, beautiful circuit, right? And a lot of parents do that, and we need to constantly try to work against that nature and just allow our children to feel so that they can feel better. Now, what happens to our sensitive children who are resistant to vulnerable emotion? So they will come up against frustration, get frustrated, there's no change, and they don't allow themselves to move into sadness because it's too vulnerable. So they get stuck in frustration. And this is where it gets tricky. This is where parents feel confused. This is where it's a frustration and anger, a kind of a self-generating emotion. So they don't really get the same type of emotional release. And that's one of the reasons why these kids can go on forever, kind of stuck in a really intense, aggressive meltdown or tantrum. There is still some emotional release, but it's not really giving these children the same healing effect as if they move into sadness. So then, if we continue the traffic circle, they cannot go out and change. They cannot even go out in acceptance and the soft tears. Nope, it doesn't allow them to feel better truly. So the next outlet you see on the traffic circle is aggression. Somewhere and somehow, all of this built up frustration will need to come out. So then you will see a heightened and more common levels of behavior of aggression, of hitting, and they're pushing or scratching or biting, and all of these difficult behaviors. Our job is to help our child move from mad to sad. And unfortunately, because of this tendency of like, oh, it's too much for me to go into sadness, and disappointment feels too painful or too vulnerable, these kids naturally push against completing the circle. And their meltdowns are so intense often that the parents tend to not set the limit in the first place. So they're kind of missing out double, there's like a double missing out on these experiences that will help them develop emotional intelligence, emotional self-regulation skills. And I think this is also talked about being one of the reasons why these kids are often about 2 years behind kind of their peers, maybe, when it comes to emotion regulation skills development. But it will happen. It does take longer if the child is still being supported, and we can talk about now more of the practical aspects, but it will happen. And it's important for parents to still keep being patient with these kids, because I know when they enter elementary age is when you really start to be concerned. And this is where your family, extended family, your friends, they double down on you like, okay, your child is still melting down like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and they're already 6 turning, and that's just not okay. And now your approach hasn't been working so far. So now you have to really take a 360 or a 180 and just come in with all the consequences and all the punishment and the harsh discipline, because this kid is not really. It's a difficult kind of a time
Moment.
to navigate, right? I think a lot of parents will relate to that. But something clicks usually between 7 and 9. And I can attest personally to that. You just kind of have to wait for it to merge and click. You've been supporting your child as much as you can, and then you just need to give them a little bit more time. And it's incredible how much happens when that kind of maturity piece is a little bit further along. And I can say that we were traveling with my now 9-year-old the 2 summers ago back to our home country, and it was nice, but it was also kind of sad. Like so many people around us were just complimenting him to us, like, oh my God, he's incredible. He's grown so much, and he's so intelligent, so clever, and he's so compassionate, and he's so thoughtful, and he's doing good, and he's so helpful, and he listens so well. All of these things, these are the same people who are like, I don't know what happened, but this is not gonna go so well for him. So I hope that gives people kind of the hope that they're often looking for when parenting these kids.
I loved how you talked about what happens if we don't stick to the boundaries and we try to avoid it. But somehow I also understand the parents who are afraid of sticking to the boundaries when they have this child who gets aggressive and who starts screaming and it doesn't go away. And they have this image of, okay, now I will be here for 45 minutes listening to this super angry and aggressive child. I'd rather go around, I'd rather not give the limits, and I rather do everything else that I can. how can we approach this child, and how can we approach also us?
Mhm.
How do we behave in situations like this? And how do we feel better in situations like this?
Oh, it really is challenging. And I find myself, more often than I would like to admit, I'm turning my head in the other direction just because I don't really think I have the energy. And then we start to imagine the worst case scenario. Okay, am I going to set the limit now? How is he going to react? And all of those kind of thoughts that go through our mind, and they can make us act in a more permissive way than we ideally would like to, and that we know better, but it's hard to navigate. And I have to say, I have a mantra that I love mantras. I say to myself, this is hard, but it's worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it. And we have to also remember they're scanning the environment for proof that they are too much, that we cannot handle them, that they are kind of a lost case, or unlovable kind of thing. And the message that we are sending them when we decide not to intervene, or we kind of let them go, and be unsafe for themselves or another or the environment, is, you are too much for me and I cannot handle you, and I'm afraid of your emotions, and I'm afraid of you, I'm afraid of your behavior. And that's not the message that we want to consistently send. We want to exactly counter that. So we have to be very hands-on and really tried to put in the work when they are young, and it's going to be worth it. And we can always do better. Even if we haven't been going down that route, we can still, decide today, I'm going to really try, and I'm going to really step up and be there to set these boundaries for my kid. Um, but I want to talk about the challenge of when meltdowns turn into aggression, and how to handle physical aggression from your child, because that's quite common for these kids, and people don't really talk about it that much. At least I found you never get like one answer, like what to do when your child is coming at you. You're trying to be a safe space for them. You're removing them from the situation, which is really important, because we don't want them to, their emotions and anger, or to kind of spill over into the environment. Parents ask me, so what I do, like my child is just ruining his toys, or you know being very destructive. Do I just allow him to do that? No, of course not, because you also don't want your child to experience themselves as a monster, or as someone who's completely out of control. You have to kind of be there to contain that. So no, thank you, I'm not going to let you do that. We're going to go into a safe space, so let's find another room or something that's a little bit more contained. First step in a really difficult situation. They're melting down, and then they're coming at you with aggression. What do? You hear parent educators say, hold their hands, don't let them hit you. Say, I can't let you hit me. Um, it's not safe. You can be mad, but you cannot hit me or hurt me, or something like that. I have tried so many different routes, and I've gone, like, I really have been experimenting with what I feel is the best. But this is for me, and it's a very personal thing. I have to say that holding the hands usually backfires. In my case, it just kind of makes the interaction even more difficult. My child seems to get even more angry, even more aggressive, even more physical. And I don't know about people out there, but when I'm holding my child and I'm using it, requires some kind of physical strength, right? And as I'm trying to regulate myself, it doesn't help me regulate when I'm also kind of being strong and kind of holding my child. It feels aggressive. So what has happened to me is that I'm trying to stay calm, but then I'm holding the hands, or trying to, like, kind of almost wrestle my child a little bit in that moment, and I end up losing my composure, and I've kind of squeezed too hard. I'd be like, that's not okay, or become this kind of more aggressive than I would ever want to with my child. So what has helped me is an approach of basically blocking your child more than holding. I know that some parents will say, well, do you then just allow your child to hit you? It's really not that, because it's not painful when you block. I feel more in control. And kind of I feel like the aggression soothes down faster. So let's say the child, I mean, they're out of control. They cannot control their actions, so they are hitting towards your body, and I kind of block their hands. And I'm quite firm, but sorry, no, thank you. Or I say nothing. It's helpful. I mean, it's people who are continuously kind of in this situation where your child is getting physically aggressive and it's not going to last forever. They simply cannot control their behavior in this moment. What are you really going to do? People ask me, what am I supposed to do? It's not like I can just force my child to stop. This is what has helped me a lot. And I want to just be very open and give people options. And I think our goal should always be to try and regulate the child. And it starts with us staying regulated. And I feel like this has helped me stay on top of the situation, more regulated, more kind of able. I feel able when I do that. So I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts on responding to aggression, physical aggression from your child?
I think my children are not really highly sensitive, so I have the experience that if something like this happens or happened, they are a little older now. So in the past, what helped me was that I hold the hands or I hug them in a way to, tell
Center
them
them.
you are safe, you're with me, and I'm hugging you, not tight, but also, not letting you hurt someone
Bear
else or
hug.
something like that.
Yeah.
And it always worked for me, but I also know that there are different types of kids, different types of families, and everyone reacts in a different way. So I think it's a matter of trying out
Mhm.
what
Exactly.
what suits
I
the
think it's
child.
like you're saying, it's very important. And I think for my other children, that exactly will work much better, like a bear hug or.
Yeah.
But then I think it's so important that parents hear a few options and also maybe feel validated in the fact that there's not just one thing that will work. And then if it doesn't work, then what? Is your child broken? Are you broken? Are you failing? Is your child failing? What's happening?
Yeah.
So, you're left confused and with no tools. So that's why I try to be as open as I can with like how I've tried to experiment with different things. And hopefully that will inspire other people to just be open-minded that, yes, it's
Yeah.
an alarming behavior, but it still happens a lot, especially for these kids, and it won't last forever. And you're allowed to navigate it in different ways. It's not just one way. That is right.
Let's talk more about other support. What are the kinds of practices? We talked about this, but there will be more, environments and practices that really help these children thrive,
Mhm.
especially when their nervous system feels overwhelmed. Do you have some other ideas, some other tips that could be practical and, doable at
Mhm.
home?
So I think we want to think of these children and their emotions like a container of glass, maybe a water container, and their tension builds up over time and faster for these kids than the next child oftentimes because they're just taking in their environment in a faster, more overwhelming way, right? So then we want to do a few things. We want to help release the tension so that the water stays below, without spilling over constantly. But also, we want to help reduce tension building up, right? So, like, release. We talked about the soft tears, super important. Really try to hold space for meltdowns, and very, very precious if your child can move into soft tears, into holding space for that disappointment. So that will be almost the biggest type of release that a child can have. But also playfulness. Playfulness is a great source of release for the child. It has to be authentic playfulness. I don't really like when parents are like playing a role and they're really like dying inside and they're so bored, or they don't want to play, or they don't want to be like, wrestling or whatever, roughhousing with their kids, but they're doing it anyway. It's, you have to find ways for it to be authentic to you. And that's when the real magic happens. Movement, be outside in nature. Independent play is a great release of built up tension. And you can see that the children who are often most stuck, they don't really play, because you need the sense of ease, internal peacefulness, and creativity and imagination to kind of come together. And so that's also something to look out for. When it comes to reducing that buildup, I like to talk to people about trying not to overschedule these kids. Obviously, screen time also is something that will fill. Endless criticism, we're always telling them what to do. And I hear myself when I'm saying this, it's been kind of a rough 2 weeks, and I've been on my son, like kind of just in his ear, everything that he has to do and everything that he's not doing. And it is so tiring for them. So really try to reduce that and prioritize connection. Ask them questions instead of endlessly telling them what to do. So what can you do next? Or what was your plan? Or what do you need to do to not be cold outside when you go to school? Remember my jacket.
Yeah.
These kind of things, instead of endlessly put that on, do that, do this, a very simple tip, but it really works. So that's like the demands and the external pressure. And I also want to help parents think about, in what situation does your child thrive? Because these kids are clever, they're intelligent, they're amazing, they're talented, they're skillful. There is definitely a scenario where you do not have to say no to your child. You do not have to be like, oh my God, here we go again. My child is the only one who is blah, blah, blah. And I'm just kind of embarrassed over here. Or, have that disappointed look or be kind of on them. Where are you truly enjoying your child? Where are you just looking at them with spark in your eyes and like genuine smile and just in awe of the beautiful human that they are? Do that, like try to find ways to schedule whatever that is in your life, because these kids need us to think about the balance in how much are we appreciating them and how much are we criticizing them, and often they are getting the short end of that stick. So think about that. It's a very, very good exercise to do. And then responsibility as the last one. So we talked about release, reduce, and our responsibility. And these are the 3 R's that I learned from my good friend and incredible parenting educator, Ashley Warner. Her platform and workshops and website is wonderful, Raising Humans Kind. I want to credit her because she's been a mentor and a guide for me as well on my journey for my highly sensitive son. So she talks about the 3 R's, and the last one is responsibility. And I love one thing that she says, it always plays in my head. It's like, if you are a parent of a highly sensitive, strong-willed child, you just kind of have to accept that for a season in your life, you're not going to be one of those parents who can sip your daiquiri or Aperol Spritz or whatever in the afternoon by the pool while the kids are playing in the bouncy castle behind the house. I know it feels unfair and you wish you could, but it's not realistic, and it's not serving your child at this moment. It's not going to last, especially if you're able to take responsibility for being hands-on and kind of being close, ready to intervene when social situation can get tricky. If your child is in a phase where they're pushing their friends or they're kind of getting angry and frustrated easily, you cannot abandon them in that situation. they are developing their self-worth, they're developing their sense of, their confidence and who they are as people. And we don't want them to constantly be getting into negative interactions in their environment. So we have to be there to help them be successful, help them be good, following the rules, and kind of then we have to intervene. We have to kind of maybe take them out of the situation, take a break if it's not going well. So don't worry, the more you put in those more challenging seasons, the more rewarded your child, you, and everyone will be. So, that is our responsibility. And we have to accept that maybe our child is not ready to be going to summer camp. Next year, it's probably better, or after 2 years. Maybe we're not just going to leave them in the aftercare at our church or in the school where there are, adolescent guides who are not experienced working with children. Maybe it's just not the best fit. It doesn't serve our child in that moment. It's going to be fine. They can do it later. They still have time. So these three things I can talk about endlessly, but I think that these are pretty tangible, kind of practical things to keep in mind.
They are. Thank you. Is there anything else that we haven't said and you would still like to mention?
I think I have to. I don't think I can leave without sharing what I call my secret weapons. I'll try to do it fast. And of course, there are like a million gazillion things that we did not cover. But the two things I want to leave people with is, number one, the practice of always trying to see the best in the child. And it's coined the most generous interpretation, MGI. You can Google it, and there's so many great examples of this that you can start to kind of think about and internalize. But really, it's just that. That's how also I want to be perceived in the world. I make a million mistakes, and I am sometimes a terrible, human being who is not really being thoughtful like I want to, and I'm being misunderstood. I wish that the people around me do not take that for face value, but they actually have their most generous interpretation on me in mind, when I'm navigating the world and bumping into walls. And I want to do that for my child so that they continue to see that we see beyond their behavior and that we see to their core and the goodness and the heart that they really have. And of course, when we do that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They step into that identity much more because this is what we perceive. This is what we are sending this message. This is who you are. This is what I see. So most generous interpretation is gold for these kids. The second thing is, and it's kind of linked to it, is to notice the good intentions, even when the outcome doesn't reflect it. Okay, so very quick story to put it into practical kind of, I think this is yesterday or the day before. My kids were getting ready to go to school, and my 4-year-old was trying to put on their shoes, and it wasn't really going so well. And I think he did ask for help at some point. And then my sensitive 9-year-old big brother is like so ready to help. He's like, I can do it for you. And he comes over and he starts to help him put his shoes on. Somewhere in that interaction, my 4-year-old decides he doesn't want the help anymore. He's like, I can do it. Oh. And then my 9-year-old, with a very good intention, has kind of a hard time to let go of helping him put the shoe on. So it turns into an argument. And actually, and I could feel I was getting a little bit frustrated listening to them on the sidelines. Like, this is so pointless. Oh my God, like, come on, just let it be. But my 9-year-old had a hard time and he just really wanted to help him and the other one. So they ended up fighting and being really upset at each other. And I was able to notice the good intention in that moment. I'm not always able, but I was able. I saw what you were trying to do. You wanted to help your brother with his shoe, but he didn't want to help. And then you both got upset, whatever. But see, like the outcome was terrible, but the good intention is there. And when we notice the good intention, that's huge for these kids. And it helps them stay true and not kind of lose connection with that compass that they really do have, because they're so empathetic and they're so compassionate. And that is the driver of so much of what we see, but the outcome then is maybe not what we want to see. So if we can just focus on the intention, that really keeps our kids moving in the right direction. And then when their impulse control develops and when their emotion regulation skills also develop, when they mature, that's when it clicks. And easily they just move forward in that way. And the outcome starts to reflect their intention more and more and more and more. It's a beautiful thing to witness.
Thank you. It's a beautiful way to end this interview. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kristin. It was a pleasure listening to you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being here. End of the day, I feel like I'm gonna be a really great mom when I come home this afternoon.
That's really good. And I believe that everyone who was listening today got so much inspiration.
Thank you so much, Lucy. It was really a true honor to be here, and I can't wait for next year.